The date is September 11th, 2001, a Tuesday morning in New York City. The sky is a piercing. For millions of people, it is just another workday. Commuters are pouring into the subways, coffee in hand, unaware that the world they know is about to vanish forever. The city is waking up, the stock market is preparing to open, and the rhythm of the metropolis is as steady as a heartbeat. But at Logan International Airport in Boston, Newark Liberty, and Dulles International, a group of men are passing through security checkpoints. They are quiet, focused, and carrying a secret that will redefine the 21st century. They aren't just passengers, they are the vanguard of a nightmare that has been years in the making. They have studied the vulnerabilities of the American aviation system. They have practiced their moves in flight simulators, and they are ready to die for a cause that most of the world cannot even fathom. How do you hijack a commercial airliner with nothing but small blades and a fanatical will? The plan was as simple as it was devastating. 19 men, divided into 4 teams, had spent months training in flight schools across Florida, Arizona, and Minnesota. They didn't need to learn how to land. They only needed to know how to steer a massive Boeing jet into a fixed target. The first sign of trouble comes from the cockpit of American Airlines Flight 11. At 8:14 a.m., the plane stops responding to air traffic control. Inside the cabin, the hijackers have made their move. They use mace or pepper spray to drive passengers to the back of the plane. They claim to have a bomb. Flight attendants Madeline Sweeney and Betty Ong managed to place calls to the ground, providing the first chilling details of the takeover. The cockpit is not answering. Ong whispers into the phone. Somebody stabbed in business class. And I think there's mace that we can't breathe. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11, a Boeing 767 carrying 81 passengers and 11 crew members, is screaming toward the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The impact is a roar that shakes the very foundation of Manhattan. A gash opens between the 93rd and 99th floors, instantly severing all 3 stairwells and trapping hundreds of people above the fire. The world watches in confusion, thinking it might be a tragic accident, a pilot's error, or a mechanical failure. But the horror is only beginning. 17 minutes later, as the world's cameras are trained on the smoke rising from the North Tower, United Airlines Flight 175 emerges from the haze. It tilts sharply, banking at over 500 miles per hour, and slams into the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors. The realization hits like a physical blow. America is not just witnessing a tragedy, it is under a coordinated military-style attack. To understand why this happened, we must look thousands of miles away, to the rugged, wind-swept mountains of Afghanistan. Here, a man named Osama bin Laden, the son of a Saudi construction billionaire, had built a network known as Al-Qaeda. Bin Laden was not a traditional soldier. He was a wealthy, educated ideologue who had been radicalized during the Soviet-Afghan War. He viewed the United States not as a beacon of democracy, but as the Great Satan, the primary obstacle to his vision of a global Islamic caliphate. In 1996 and again in 1998, he issued a fatwa, a religious decree declaring war on America. He called on every Muslim who could to kill Americans and their allies, both civilian and military. The 9/11 plot, originally conceived by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was pitched to bin Laden in 1996. Bin Laden provided the funding, the recruits, and the strategic direction. He chose the targets, he vetted the muscle hijackers, and he waited for the moment when he could strike at the heart of the infidel superpower. Why attack America? For bin Laden and his followers, it was about 3 main pillars of resentment that had festered for decades. First, and perhaps most importantly, was the presence of US troops in Saudi Arabia. Following the 1990 Gulf War, the US had maintained a military presence in the kingdom, the land of the two holy mosques, Mecca and Medina. To bin Laden, this was a desecration of sacred soil by Crusader forces. Second was the ongoing and unwavering US support for Israel in its conflict with the Palestinians. Al-Qaeda used the imagery of Palestinian suffering to recruit and justify their violence. And third were the devastating economic sanctions against Iraq throughout the 1990s, which bin Laden claimed had led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent children. He wanted to provoke the United States into a clash of civilizations. He believed that by striking the Twin Towers, the symbols of global financial power, and the Pentagon, the symbol of military might, he could force the US into a long, draining war in the Middle East. He hoped to bankrupt the superpower, just as the Mujahideen had bankrupted the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. In the years following the attacks, a painful question emerged. Could 9/11 have been prevented? The 9/11 Commission report would later reveal a failure of imagination. There were warnings. In July 2001, an FBI agent in Phoenix sent a memo warning that bin Laden might be sending students to US flight schools. In August, President George W. Bush received a briefing titled, "Bin Laden Determined to Strike in US." But the various intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, were not sharing information. There were silos of data that failed to connect the dots. The hijackers were already in the country, some of them living openly under their real names even as they were on watch lists. The system was blinking red, but no one was able to stop the clock. While New York burned, the attack expanded. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, which had taken off from Dulles, struck the western wall of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The nerve center of the world's most powerful military was breached. 125 people inside the building and 64 on the plane were killed. Back in Manhattan, the unthinkable happened. The South Tower, despite being hit second, was the first to fall. The structural steel, weakened by the intense heat of the jet fuel fires, could no longer support the weight of the floors above. At 9:59 a.m., in a terrifying cascade of steel and concrete, the tower collapsed in just 10 seconds. The North Tower followed 29 minutes later. A cloud of toxic dust and debris swallowed the city, turning day into night. There was a fourth plane, United Flight 93. It had been delayed on the tarmac, a delay that would prove fatal for the hijackers' plans. By the time the hijackers took control, the passengers were using seat-back phones to call their families. They learned of the towers. They realized their plane was a bomb. Led by men like Todd Beamer, Mark Bingham, and Jeremy Glick, the passengers voted to rush the cockpit. "Are you guys ready? Okay, let's roll," were the last words heard from Beamer. The plane crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, just 20 minutes flying time from Washington, D.C. They sacrificed their lives to save the US Capitol or the White House. The sun set on a world that would never be the same. The war on terror began almost immediately. The US invaded Afghanistan to topple the Taliban and hunt for bin Laden. 2 years later, the war expanded to Iraq. Security became a permanent, intrusive fixture of daily life, from the creation of the TSA to the passage of the Patriot Act. But amidst the ash and the grief, there were stories of incredible, selfless heroism that emerged from the darkness. Firefighters from the FDNY and officers from the NYPD and Port Authority ran up the stairs of the burning towers while everyone else ran down, carrying heavy gear into a furnace of heat and smoke. 343 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers made the ultimate sacrifice that day. There were individuals like Wells Crowther, known as the man in the red bandana. A 24-year-old equities trader and volunteer firefighter, he used his training to lead at least a dozen people to safety from the South Tower's upper floors before he was lost when the building collapsed. And there were the thousands of ordinary citizens who formed human chains, shared water, and helped total strangers navigate the nightmare. These stories of resilience became the bedrock upon which the city and the nation began to rebuild. The 9/11 attacks were designed to break the spirit of a nation, to sow fear and division. But in the immediate aftermath, the world saw something else. A global outpouring of sympathy and a domestic surge of unity. For a brief moment, the world was one. The hunt for Osama bin Laden would take nearly a decade. He vanished into the Tora Bora Mountains during the initial invasion, slipping through the fingers of US Special Forces and their Afghan allies. For years, he remained a ghost. A spectral figure taunting the West through occasional video and audio messages delivered to news outlets like Al Jazeera. He became the world's most wanted man with a $25 million bounty on his head. It wasn't until May 2, 2011 that the trail finally led to a high-walled compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, just a mile from a prestigious military academy. The mission, Operation Neptune Spear, was carried out by an elite team of US Navy SEALs. In a daring nighttime raid, they descended from Black Hawk helicopters, breached the compound, and ended the life of the man who had orchestrated the most devastating terrorist attack in history. The news of his death brought a sense of closure to many, but it also served as a reminder of the long, arduous road to justice. In the United States, the 9/11 Commission was established to provide a full and complete account of the circumstances surrounding the attacks. Their final report, published in 2004, was a landmark document. It detailed the failure of imagination that allowed the plot to succeed and provided a roadmap for overhauling the nation's intelligence and security apparatus. It led to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, fundamentally restructuring how America protects itself. Today, the site where the towers once stood is a place of profound reflection. The National September 11th Memorial and Museum features two massive reflecting pools set within the footprints of the original Twin Towers. The names of the 2,977 victims are etched in bronze, forever cooled by the largest man-made waterfalls in North America. We remember the day the sky fell, not just to honor the dead, but to understand the forces that continue to shape our world.